worked with post-traumatic stress disorder with Vietnam veterans. She's taught at Highline Community College? No. North Seattle Community College and Woodinville High School. Is that right? She has roots on Bainbridge Island, now lives in Seattle. Her first book of poetry, as I referenced earlier, is Now the Day is Over. And if you read the story in the newspaper, you probably know the story a little bit. Her father was a drama critic for the New York Times who left that job to become a minister and was had a great deal of charisma as a minister. I think she said he had a way of bewitching people today in class that were drawn to him, but he also had a secret, which was his alcoholism. And this book, Now the Day is Over, chronicles that in these kind of vignettes that you heard Barbie and Tony read tonight. And 15 years ago, or actually in 1997, so 18 years ago when this book came out, it was instrumental in me recovering my own memories from trauma and being able to feel permission to write about those kinds of things in a very indirect way, but yet that's the way poetry works oftentimes. So I wanted first to say thank you for writing this book, Joan, and for the effect it had on my life. And Amy and I have been the publishers and co-owners of Blue Begonia Press for, I'll say, 6 years probably now altogether. And during that time, we published 9 books of poetry, and that was a pretty steady pace for us for 6 years. And we thought, okay, we're going to take a little break and step back and do a few other things related to the press that need to get done. This book will be our last book. And then I got an email from Joan that said, I've got this other book, I've got this manuscript, would you look at it? It was a manuscript that I had already known about from Jim. Jim had earlier said when we were talking about Now the Day is Over, you know, she's got this other story. And so we had to do this one actual last book before we take a little bit of a break. And the result of it is Namesake. This, of course, is her mother, her namesake, and this is Joan here. Her mother was a Broadway actress, also had a way of magic about her, a touch of magic. I don't want to steal too much of what you're going to say about it. And she grew up in this house with these two amazing figures who had a profound impact, a loving impact on her life. But just as her father dealt with alcoholism, her mother dealt with issues relating to mental illness. So we are very fortunate, blessed to have Joan with us here for tonight, with us in the classroom, with us in our houses of worship, and with us in our hearts as well. So please help me welcome Joan Fiset.
I just want to say a little bit about what happened in the classroom today and about my writing, and invite you on your own to try it for yourself. We were driving here tonight and I saw the full moon, the full streak of light. I always know what the moon is doing. I think that goes back to childhood. I really keep track. And then when it disappears, and then the little tiny new moon, the little fragile new hope, it's called. That's the kind of memory I'm talking about. Not big memories where you recall, and in a family, everybody has a different memory of the same event often. But these are just the little, I said dust motes, tiny, even just a hunch, just a feeling. And you just kind of gather whatever that suggests to you. And you heard what she wrote. Try it. We all have had our lives. I had a life with two really wonderful parents who were terribly messed up and lots of real high drama, but I was adored, and so was my sister, so I wouldn't trade my life. But the high drama, so what? You know, we've all had lives, we've all suffered, we've all had our own trauma, and if writing is something you haven't tried, I'd say try it. We can all, I know we can all do it. I'm going to begin to sound like my mother. But I taught writing for 30 years. I taught firemen, I taught junior high, I taught adults, I taught senior citizens. Today, my dance class, of course, your writers are already writers, but we can all do it. It's just the resistance. So take some little flicker of something it will talk through you. Well, Dan, thank you for the recap of my parents. The fairy tale was their early life, and my mother, I mentioned this in the church bulletin that I wrote, but she was discovered in summer stock by George Jean Nathan, who was an internationally known drama critic by that time. He had discovered Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams. Actors were just terrified of him because he was so huge. So he saw her in summer stock, and she was a complete nobody, and he was just transfixed. And he went back to New York and told Dick Watts, the other big New York Times, or he was a different newspaper. But they went and saw her again, encouraged her to come to Broadway. She got a part in Echo's Father, the Ingenue. And my father was a drama critic and saw her, and they were very attracted to each other. And then they married quickly, and he went off to war, to World War II, where he served in combat for 2 years. And she became pregnant with me. And then he returned, and he could have gone back to the New York Times, but he went to Union Theological Seminary, and the stories differ about this. I mean, I've read articles where he said he did that because he had so many questions after the war, but he also told me that he went there because he really sensed my mom wasn't stable, and he wanted her to have a contained environment, because I was there. So who knows what the true story is. But this pretty much starts in the seminary, and I do have an eerie recall, and I remember things from the age of 2. So all of these memories, but many of them have come back to me by just these little wispy desmos. And my mother, being an actress, read to me, and I'm so glad she did. She read to me Alice in Wonderland and Winnie the Pooh when I was 2 years old. And so often I didn't know what it was about, like the White Knight. I mean, Alice in Wonderland was very complex, but the language I took in. And so she read Pooh with all the voices, so I thought I would just inoculate my reading with this. "Is anybody home?" asked Pooh. "No," said Rabbit. "Oh," said Pooh, "I thought there was." Namesake. My mother was named after Joan of Arc. I am named after my mother. She used to tell me stories of the peasant girl who never learned to read. When she milked the cows, she heard voices telling her to save France. She wore a suit of armor when she rode on horseback, holding the French flag high as she led the soldiers into war. My mother said she was burned at the stake. I used to imagine her tied to a wooden pole while tongues of fire licked her ankles, then moved upward until the red flames and smoke consumed her. I envisioned her looking up to the sky as if somehow she understood this horrible thing happening to her. When my mother said Joan of Arc was born to save her country, her voice grew serious and calm. She said she became Saint Joan because of her suffering. She talked about Joan of Arc as if we were she and she was us. Performance. In the seminary where my father is a divinity student, someone plays a piano. My father says to my mother, "Sing just plain Bill." She stands next to the piano and smiles, tilts her head to the side, and begins to sing. He's just a simple guy, my Bill. Her voice clear, like water rippling. Then Sentimental Journey. When she sings, "Got my bags, got my reservation, spent each dime I could afford," like a child in wild anticipation, I long to hear that, all aboard. I don't understand what all the words mean. You can tell she's going somewhere, with a suitcase in her hand. Everyone joins in when she sings 7, which I can sing. That's the time we leave, at 7. I'll be waiting up for heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. I see her leaving, but not in a song. Potholes. In nursery school, my hair grows snarls, lumpy wadded tangles impossible to comb. My mother explains they come from my sleep. Brushing my hair to cover them, she tells me, "They're hiding now. No one ever guessed." When they grow too big, my father cuts them out. Scissors leave holes I touch with my fingers. Don't worry, she would say. Your hair always grows back. Hair the color of wheat, just like the little prince. My mother lived a couple of miles from me for years. She died at 86, but I get letters from her, sometimes 3 a week, tucked in with articles about what to eat to keep you healthy, all sorts of things. So this is a letter, word for word, that I received on March 15th, or she wrote it March 15th, 1988. Grace Ray, in the tender years of my beginning, I knew her. I was 7 when I entered her house to study piano. Once a week I sat on her swivel stool to read the large black notes before me. Oh where has my little dog gone? My hands were small and eager. I can still see her solemn, sallow face, her gray, perfect hair morsels. Music in her she instilled in me. An hour a day I practiced for many years. My grandmother, secluded in the pantry making cookies, listened, sustaining me. The Stein lamp flooding my pages of music till my fingers flew in ecstasy, commanding the broad keyboard of black and white. The talent was in me. These teachers drew it out, watered it with praise. The feeling was deep that I had pulled from my agile fingers. How tenderly I remember these 2 piano teachers, their patience that guided me like beacons. I still smell the quaint summer roses drifting through the window, smell the slow cooking in Mrs. Kessman's homey kitchen as she moved through the door holding her stirring spoon high, instructing me, her rumpled hair untidily falling about her gentle face. Her young son drowned in the nearby Allegheny River one snowy night when his sled failed to stop. I remember how she said my gift at the piano was great. I remember how filled I was with happiness and my littleness. Now tears mingle with the notes of music they bequeathed to me. Many decades have passed, yet I miss these noble women and my music lessons and the shiny leaves that grew from the rooted plant that stood on Grace Ray's sturdy table by the large window in the mysterious room, where melodies started in my nimble fingers, grew into concertos of love, symphonies of praise, fingers of joy, hymns of glory, wells of salvation, rivers of peace, one glorious Amen. Summit. Wearing a red gingham checked maternity top, my mother plays the Big Rock Candy Mountain on her upright piano, sings Lemonade Springs where the bluebird sings on the Big Rock Candy Mountain. Her hands a blur up and down the keys. I imagine a mountain, sugar, jagged as ice. Hideout. My mother and I stayed with my grandmother and grandfather in the parsonage in Providence, Rhode Island, while my father was in the war. My mother tells me my grandmother told her she hated babies. She wouldn't let her feed me. I was on a schedule. She gave me a bottle at certain times. I cried and cried. She told me this as long as I can remember. I know the words before she says them, and imagine the baby at the end of the long hallway. Birds bring crumbs through the window into a room dim like in the pantry off the kitchen, where I hide and no one finds me. Forbearance. It is summer. I'm visiting my cousins, Gay and Diane, in New Haven. My Aunt Phil takes us to someone's house for an outdoor party. Green and white striped lawn chairs, bowls of potato chips, pretzels, and mixed nuts. People play croquet and badminton. I like it when the mallet strikes the wooden ball and watch it as it rolls through the metal wickets. The yellow, green, red, blue, or orange stripe on the ball matches the stripe around the handle of the mallet. While my cousins play, I sit in a chair beneath the green umbrella. A breeze crosses my face, then moves on. I imagine it traveled to wherever my mother is, touched her face, and then came back to me. Sufficient. It snowed last night. Outside the air is cold. I begin to make a snow horse, roll a large ball of snow and then try to shape it. Legs begin to form, then the neck. Its head doesn't look like a horse. It's hard, only half my size. It looks more like a dog. I smooth it with my wool mittens, my face numb, the sky gray. My mother watches me from the kitchen window. I pretend I don't see her. I want to do this by myself, alone. Anybody in this room remember Super Circus?
Super Circus?
It was a long time ago. Mary Hartline. Maestro. Mary Hartline conducts the Super Circus band in her short dress with a white song note on the front. She wears white boots with tassels and has long blonde hair. She holds a thin white baton and faces away from the band while she moves it up and down or to the side. She smiles as she brings music into the television, even though people playing the instruments can't see her hands or follow the baton. Sunday dinner. I just have to say this. Mary Pearson, her mother lived down the street from us in Gardner, Massachusetts, on Woodland Avenue, and probably had Sunday dinner at the Colonial Hotel. So Mary's here tonight. After church, we have dinner at the Colonial Hotel. A man who's a deacon in my father's church owns it and never gives him a bill. My mother always orders prawns. I have a shrimp cocktail in a tall glass dish and deep-fried clam strips. My sister's in a high chair and eats some of my mother's dinner. Before we sit down, I see cloth napkins folded beneath our knife and spoon, flowers in the middle of the table. My mother and father study the menu. There's music playing, and I ask, why can't it always be like this? But they don't say anything, because they're waiting for the waiter to come to our table in his white jacket and black bow tie to ask, what can I bring you? Departure. Before driving to Rhode Island to visit my grandparents, we wait. My sister and I in the back seat, our father behind the steering wheel. Inside the house, our mother checks the stove, then patrols each room, making sure our father's cigarette butts are out. Sometimes she pours water into the ashtray. He honks the horn. Between his teeth, we hear, what's she doing in there? Finally, she opens the door, double checks to make sure it's locked. When she gets in the car, she turns around to smile at us and asks if our doors are locked. Silence, all the way to Providence. Mirrored. A staircase to the right of the first floor entry hall turns left onto the second floor landing. I slide down the banister's polished wood backwards, holding on. The top floor's white rails keep us from falling. These stairs have the feeling of ascent, of rising. I trip down them as fast as I can. A mirror hangs in front where they begin. I saw myself in the mirror once, my hair secured in ponytails with rubber bands. This face surprised me, a child rounding the bend on her way to some destination. The fleeting image lasted because the mirror was there. Inspiration. On the way to School Street School, I walk by the beauty shop on the first floor of the Woodland Spa. Taped to the window, posters with perfectly coiffed hairdos, waves and curls that don't look real, strapless evening gowns, cheeks aglow, pale rouge like movie stars in dusky light. Something about them informs my reading of Sherry Ames' student nurse books I borrow from the library. 18-year-old Sherry Ames takes the first steps on the road to a nursing career as she begins 3 years of training at Spencer Hospital. And A Date for Marcy by Rosemary Dujardin. Identical twins pretend to be each other, fooling the boy who believes he's dating one, when he's really dating her sister. On the dust jacket, 2 teenage girls with perfect features wear bright red lipstick. The perfection of hair and features is what I desire when I ask for a nurse's kit for my 9th birthday. Cardboard case with handle and clasp, compartments hold plastic thermometer, stethoscope, crisp white paper cap, a bottle of multicolored candy pills. Holding the nurse's kit, I feel capable, competent, beautiful, and confident like Sherry Ames in her white apron striped uniform as she holds her clipboard and sharp pencil. Even though I consume the bottle of candy pills right after receiving my nurse's kit, I carry it for days, offering to take my mother or sister's temperature or check their pulse to to make us well. Hearts. My ballroom dancing class Valentine's Day party will have a prize for the best costume. My mother's sewing mine from a white sheet. The short skirt's like Mary Hartline's on Super Circus. The sleeveless top attaches to the skirt. When she fits the top and skirt, she says, "Stand very still." With pins in her mouth, it's hard to talk. She tugs on the skirt to make sure the hem hangs straight. Her black sewing machine sits on its cabinet, light left on, while she turns up the hem. She cuts 2 huge hearts out of stiff red paper, loops red yarn around through small holes punctured through the tops. She pastes white lace around them, attaches a small bouquet of felt violets to the lower side of the heart, covering my front. The Valentine hearts reach from my neck to below my waist. She sews a white cap, attaches a red paper heart to the back. I win the prize for best costume. Runners-up are Kenneth Bonk, Robin Hood with a bow and arrow, and Brian Sims, white-faced clown with a mop of orange hair. I'm wearing red lipstick to match the heart. In the Gardner News, photographs my hearts and lipstick look dark. Incendiary. Flannel is flammable, so is batiste. Sun through a window, nightgowns catch on fire. Electric cord or outlet, lace of fear in summer heat, shimmer in the light of noon. Banana on the refrigerator turns black, shrivels to leathery rot. I watch it day after day, don't take it down or put it in the garbage. The banana will not catch fire. It epitomizes stasis, except for the withering. It is a sigh, expulsion, a flattening. Tires on a truck in the cornfield. When nothing moves, there is no tension, no comings or goings, and it's good to see you because you left. Mid-afternoon, away from the stove, I wear a gingham yellow checkered skirt, gathered with a wide, stiff waistband. If I catch fire, I'll burn, yellow, orange, red, and gold. Later, thin blue flame, blue where it's hottest, where I stop. Heartsick. In 7th grade, I talked to Dennis Foster every morning at the bus stop. One morning he says, "Give up." Dennis is thin. He wears tight jeans and lives in Apple Valley. He combs his blonde hair in stiff waves with a VO5. The waves separate into spaces between the teeth in his comb. I hoped he'd be my boyfriend, watched for him in the halls. The day Dennis tells me, I run home in tears wearing a plaid cotton skirt and matching top with puff sleeves. My white joist stepladders for spring are scuffed. I fall onto the couch crying too hard to talk. My mother comes out of the kitchen to comfort me. Years later, she can still see me through the window in black watch plaid, my cotton skirt filled with the wind as I ran. Sparkling clean. When the Fuller brush man rings the doorbell, my mother invites him in. He opens his leather bag to take out brushes he lines up on the table. Some to clean your nails, others small, medium, and large to brush your hair. Brushes to remove lint from black dresses, scrub brushes to clean the floor. He explains how bristles are strong yet flexible enough to reach into corners to remove dirt or food collected there. My mother listens. She tells him how wonderful the brushes are, then offers him some coffee. After he puts them back in his bag, he sits down at the table, takes out an order form. My mother will take a hairbrush with natural bristles and a white nail brush, black bristles and handle to hold while you scrub your nails and hands. Bristles for nails along one side of the brush are in 3 separate rows. On the other side, bristles cover the brush. Jasper, our golden lab, will chew the handle until it looks like a strong machine crushed it. After he completes the order form and gives my mother a copy, the Fuller brush man tells her he's studying to be a teacher. My mother says she'll order 3 more brushes. Then asks for the catalog he was going to leave on the table. She turns its shiny pages with photographs. "Tell me about them again," she says. "Suggest the ones you think I need." Fetch. Our tri-level house is in the circle. A round street of Bell and Valdez, tri-level, split levels, some houses just on the ground. Jasper brings the neighbors' doormats home. Drops them in our yard or by our front door. He's a retriever. It's his instinct to fetch birds for hunters. My mother says he thinks doormats are something he's supposed to discover and bring home to us. Jasper is a working dog. Once he brought home a large Oriental rug rolled up and tied with dough at both ends. He stood next to it, wagging his tail. My mother kept patting his head and saying, "I just don't see how you ever got such a big rug home." It's my job to return them. I knock on the door, then ask if whoever lives there is missing the doormat. Some of the neighbors say we should fence our dog in, even though I always bring their doormats back. Entree. We're having poor man's pie. My mother carries it to the table with her green and orange oven mitts. It's made from ground beef she browns with onions, then puts in a casserole dish. She fixes mashed potatoes to cover the ground beef. This is the crust. When it comes out of the oven, the potatoes are crisp on top. She puts ketchup in the middle before she cooks the pie. There are 16 bottles of ketchup in the refrigerator. They stand next to each other. Some with an inch of ketchup or less. Others half or a third full. Some just opened. All Heinz 57. She puts one on the table if we want more ketchup with our poor man's pie. When I say I'll clean up the kitchen, she says, "That's wonderful, sweetheart," as if she's throwing someone a bridal bouquet and it's a summer afternoon. As I gather up dishes to stack next to the sink, she watches from the kitchen table where she's drinking a cup of instant coffee and twisting her foot. Sometimes she weaves her fingers together. I wonder if I'll ever finish washing the silverware. The knives, forks, and spoons don't match. Some have the letter B for our last name engraved on the handle. They used to belong to my grandmother. Others have small stars ordered with box tops from laundry detergent. When I wash all the dishes, silverware, and pans, I dry them, put them away, wipe the pink formica, and sweep the floor. There are 2 pewter glasses on the windowsill with sour milk. I don't take them down or wash them. My mother holds her coffee cup to her chin, says the kitchen has never looked so beautiful. I have a touch for domesticity and am an artist. I hear her as I take off the apron, then hang it on the hook just above the basement stairs. Dry my hair. My mother worries if I go outside. A damp head could lead to strep throat, scarlet fever, and a heart murmur. When Babs Nichols tells her about Mini Poo dry shampoo, my mother announces it will save water and keep us from going outdoors with wet heads. The blue cylinder of Mini Poo has a pale aqua background, the head of a woman wearing a clip-on earring. Red hair drifts around to the back and matches her lipstick. My mother reads to my sister and me about the new Dry Way and how this delicately scented powder cleanses hair easily. It's a beauty must. Removes oil and odors quickly, leaving our hair soft and lustrous. It won't disturb our waves. Mini Poo comes with a soft white mitten my mother uses to rub in the powder. I imagine small spiders trapping the oil and odors underneath the mitten. Afterwards, it's hard to get the powder out of my hair. It's stuck together, filming, and I feel it with my fingers. Can't shampoo Mini Poo is probably for people who are busy or away on trips. On the back of the container, it also says, ideal for sick room use, but that's different. Confidant. When he sings "You're Nobody Till Somebody Loves You" on the radio, my mother says Dean Martin's voice opens wounds in her heart. Hands over her breastbone, she imagines riding in a gondola in Venice, my father holding her hand. She doesn't understand why he leaves when she sits beside him on the couch. After I come home from school, she tells me this while we drink our instant coffee. First try. I asked my mother and father for the Better Homes and Gardens new cookbook for my 15th birthday. It's red and white check cover with 5 rings, snaps open so you can add more recipes. It divides into sections with pink tabs: breads, casseroles, one-dish meals, eggs and cheese, meats, poultry, fish, vegetables, and desserts. Sections in the back are for table settings and entertainment, Glass table set with frosty blue linen mats. White dishes hold circles of strawberries filled with blueberries sprinkled with powdered sugar. The special meals section explains how to plan a supper on the porch and a birthday buffet with a make-your-own sandwich tray. When I undo the ribbon and take the cookbook out of the gift wrap, my father says he's looking forward to eating the meals I'll prepare. Soon I decide to make tuna bake with cheese swirls for dinner. The recipe calls for green pepper, onion, a can of chicken with rice soup, milk, lemon juice, a can of tuna, then flour, milk, butter, and salt to make the light crusty biscuit pinwheels into which you fold a cup of grated American cheese. I buy ingredients at the grocery store, set them on the counter with measuring spoons and cups. When everything's mixed together and topped with biscuit pinwheels, I put the Pyrex dish in the oven to bake. At the last minute, I broil the pinwheels until they are golden, like the recipe says. My mother, father, and sister sit around the table. Wearing padded oven mitts, I carry the baking dish into the dining room, then place it on a hot pad in front of my father. We hand him our plates. He gives each of us a helping. I pass the salad made yesterday, the 24-hour salad with fruit, quartered marshmallows, and whipped cream. I chilled it overnight like the cookbook said, then decorated the top with orange sections and maraschino cherries just before serving. I look at my plate, take small bites of the tuna bake. No one speaks until my mother observes how beautiful everything looks and how wonderful the dinner is. My father clears his throat, holds his fork filled with biscuit swirl and tuna in the air, and says, "Darling, this is the best meal I've ever eaten my entire life. It's perfection. You really do know how to cook. I don't know how you did it." It's quiet for a long time. My sister keeps eating. My mother looks down at her plate. I feel I've injured my mother by making this meal for the family. I wanted it to be like the pictures in the red and white check cookbook, where everyone is having a good time. After dessert, the hostess looks at her guests and says, "Shall we go into the living room?" Spark plug. I dance around the house while popular songs play on KJR or KOL. Eyelash curler between my thumb and forefinger, I twirl and pause, lean backwards until my ponytail touches the floor as I grasp the bedroom doorway. My mother watches, clasps her hands. I feel radiant, light on my feet, singing in the rain with Gene Kelly. After school, when I call out, "Mom, I'm home," she greets me expectant and eager for news. I tell her which boy said hi, share confusions of math, and speak of the trouble I got into for talking in class to Ellen or Rose. In my absence, light folds into a drawer like clothes at the end of a season. But when I return, as she hangs on my every word, the house begins to fill with alabaster clouds. I'll just read a few more. Care package. Girls in my sorority receive packages from home, usually cookies. Cheryl Josepham's mother sends Nanaimo bars, packed tight in a coffee can. Each bar has 4 layers of chocolate and buttercream. Cheryl shares them. One day I call my mother and ask her to send me cookies. She sounds surprised and asks what kind. I say peanut butter. When my care package arrives, I open a shallow box, unfold the wax paper. The cookies are broken into small pieces and crumbs. I eat a piece of a cookie, then empty the rest into the garbage can in the kitchen. Lines on the top of the broken piece where my mother pressed the fork on the cookie dough before she put it in the oven to bake. These are from the last chapter, which had its own layers. Episode. On mattress ticking in a pale yellow nightgown, 3 days, will not move, nothing moves. On the floor, cuckoo clocks tell time. High noon, the river rises. What's the full moon doing up there like a bad balloon? August, riptides, undercurrents sweep us away. I'm 32, my mother's 56. I drive her to the state mental hospital at Steilacoom. Shock treatments, Meloril, Thorazine, Haldol. For years, a waxen face that never smiles. She cannot lift a foot or raise her arm. Gone the eyes, she turned to the ceiling, counting each hole in the squares. Artiste. After she stops her medication, after her cataract surgery, my mother returns to drawing. Rises at 3 a.m. Soon hundreds of angular girls or women, winsome animals, birds, and flowers appear. She sketches on brown paper bags, paper towels, backs of paper placemats, backs of envelopes on tablets and other surfaces. She creates multimedia collages using pastels, watercolors, colored pencils, and crayons. One day she takes the bus to Pioneer Square with her art and a tablecloth. Glenn Allen of the Metropolitan Art Gallery says, "Joan, you are an artist." She will have 3 shows there. Admirers will sit at her feet at the openings as she speaks of her art, how anyone can do it. They only need to be open. They only need to let it out. She will talk of how her art grew out of her suffering, how it is the child within. One of her sketches will sell for $1,000. She will say a doctor wants to take her photograph. And he did, and it's in. And he was a professional photographer. Okay, I'll read 2 more. My father, I want to say, in addition to, he did have charisma, and he was very magical and sincere, I think. And he really had a fine mind, and he was very tormented. And he did sober up 7 years before he died, and I'm so grateful. And he went back to Bellevue and got an apartment close to the church. I'll say more about this tomorrow, but Perry Applewhite, the minister then, invited him to speak often, and it was a really positive 7 years. And he was a writer. He'd written 4 novels and almost got one published shortly after the war. And then, for my sister and myself, he wrote what he called fragments, and he gave it to us, and these were notebooks, binders with tabs about his life before we were born. And I was just astonished the way he described my mother. And this was, I'm sure he died at 67 in 1983, and this is probably 5 years before. And they didn't have contact for a long time after she left him when she was 52. So this is called Sprite, and it begins with an excerpt from Fragments, and then one of my memories, and then another one of my memories. So I'll read 2 more. Sprite. My father describes his first impression of my mother. I liked her immediately. She was not tall, but her body was slim and graceful. Her eyes made a tremendous impression on me, for they were wide apart, seemed large and luminous as they sparkled with merriment. Her blonde hair was cut in the page boy style. She was wearing a Tyrolean blouse with colorful suspenders matching her skirt. There was something extremely theatrical about her, but she also had the appearance of a young girl in her teens. On the crosstown bus heading for the subway to take me to the village, I found myself thinking about Joan Stone. The word Sprite came to mind as I responded to my feelings for her. I loved her merriment, her piquancy, and her simplicity. She seemed full of life, but also vulnerable, as if her feelings could be easily crushed. I sensed she was sensitive and emotional, though her merriment seemed real, not a facade. Hemingway touched a curl on her cheek at the Algonquin Hotel at 59 West 44th Street in Manhattan. He said she was pretty. She danced with the boy in the gazebo summer evenings in Franklin, Pennsylvania, light brown hair down to her shoulders. When I bring my fiancé home from college, she enters the living room eager and breathless. He thinks she's my sister, 6 years younger than I am. She looks as if he asked her to dance. She's all eyes. When she's 86, she stops walking and grows frail. After 6 weeks, I call 911. The ambulance takes her to the hospital. Lying on the upright table in the ER, she says proudly, "I'm the filthiest patient they've ever seen." She's been scrubbed, cleaned up, hair no longer matted. They cut out the clumps, combed the gray wisps to frame her face in tendrils. Smiling a toothless smile, she raises her thin arms to talk with her hands as always, tells the male nurse how sweet he is. Arms curve as she moves, eyes intense and bright. Her captive audience seems charmed as much as they must have been amazed. And I'll close We walk across a field, grasses high where insects buzz and sing, russet Indian paintbrush near goldenrod and Queen Anne's lace. Mrs. Cowdery walks slowly toward us. In each hand she carries an orange. Her white apron falls all the way to the ground. She holds it up to keep from tripping. When we meet in the middle of the field, she hands one orange to me, one to my mother. For many years after, my mother will say how when I was only 3, I said, "Here comes old Mrs. Cowdery walking across the field in her draggy down apron."
We have a few minutes to ask Joan questions, but I had a question as I was sitting there. How many of you had a memory come back to you that you hadn't thought of for decades? Did that happen? Isn't that amazing, the way that her stories pull our stories out of us? So if anyone has any questions for Joan about her poetry or her story, feel free to ask them.
Yes.
Do you also have poems about your sister?
There are some actually in Namesake.
I just wondered because it was primarily focused on your mom.
Mhm.
It was beautiful. And I wondered if what your relationship was with your sister must also have been deep and
Yes, and of course I was 6 years older. So I should maybe start writing some. I think my parents were such main players that they kind of took it all. And there's the one about when she was born, and my father tells me she's here, and I didn't really feel like a big sister. I mean, everything was skewed. But then she does still dance, but he'd go like this, and he'd sing a song about Dance Little Dolly with a hole, and she danced to it's in there. And he'd say, look at her dance, and she's dancing today. She's 66, and she takes ballet twice a week. She's got it. So, well, thanks for mentioning it, because they really did hog the stage. Any other questions?
Well, speaking of hogging the stage, do you think their deaths released the stories in you?
Oh, no.
Can you imagine having written these while they were here?
Well, my mother was still alive when I wrote No, the Day Was Over, but it was really my dad, pretty much. He's kind of shadowy. No, I couldn't. I started Namesake, and they both took years. But I started them after she died. And suddenly, with both of them, I mean, it was a loss, but the spaciousness. And suddenly there was some room for me. And I think that's the story. So that's a good question.
It's a good answer.
They took up a lot of room, and parents can in many different kinds of ways, but just psychically because of fumes. Any questions about anything else? Yeah.
Do you have photographs or other things, other items that bring memories to your mind that, things that trigger the memories in your own mind that just sitting and thinking aren't going to bring it to you?
No, I really wanted, I'm glad you mentioned this, and in dance class today, I mentioned Rilke and his Letters to a Young Poet. He talks about retrieving the sensory, I don't have his exact words, but the sensory images are just sensations from that rich past that go way back. So a smell, just cinnamon, just ivory soap, smell it. I mean, your senses will really deliver. And maybe not right that instant, but then if you go to something else or the next day, often something will come back. So it's retrieval is really what it is, but it's the senses. Or music can bring something back.
Did you do research? I would imagine I'm thinking of the cookbook in particular and the recipe is that from memory or are you?
I still have the good part.
Many of us.
It's not very healthy, but I'll still look through it without, it was longing for the perfection that never exists anywhere. That's its own kind of tyranny. But since it was so nuts in my house, I was just, all the TV shows, and I liked the commercials, for Fab, Lemon Fresh Fab, and this was the 50s and 60s. terrible, but I longed for that order. And so I did research Minnie Pooh, I didn't have all that. But, yeah, the cookbook I looked back at, I lived it out. But the Fully Brush Man, I remember all of that.
I'm one of your teachers.
And catalogs, I just used to lose myself in the order of catalogs. What we do with our attention to right the ship. Any other questions?
Did your mom exhibit under her married name or maiden name?
Oh, Joan, just Joan.
Just Joan.
And they never got divorced, they just sort of, that's another long story. And my dad suffered about her, felt a lot of guilt, but it's good she left him, because then he really got it together. As long as they'd stayed together, it would have just sunk. And she did have someone she was with, and that was really good. Strange. Life is strange, let's face it. Well, you've been a wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much. What a great evening for poetry, and I do hope you take Joan's advice that she gave at the beginning, which is if those memories did come up, to go home and, while the iron's hot, sit down and write some of them.
Yeah,
It's your own vignettes. And I want to make sure I say this for Emily and for Inkling's sake and for Blue Begonia's sake. If you're interested in purchasing either of her two books, there are some available. You can pick them up back there or up here, and she'd be glad to sign some books if you're interested in that. Thank you very much for coming.